Thank you for joining Money Simplified, your guide to money and mutual funds, presented by Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund. We appreciate your participation. At Personal FN, we are committed to helping investors achieve their financial goals and objectives. Our core proposition is built around unbiased research and financial planning. We wish to thank Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund for partnering with us in this investor education and awareness initiative. Welcome to Session 7 of Money Simplified, your guide to money and mutual funds. We are glad to have you with us for the 7th session on ideal asset allocation. Alright, so now let's get started and learn about asset allocation. All of us have some goals in mind, such as buying a dream home, a car, traveling abroad for leisure, children's education, their marriage, and even our own retirement needs. And to achieve them, we all endeavor to create wealth by investing in various asset classes as per our risk-taking capability. Some of us are conservative and want to invest only in fixed income instruments because of the fear of losing money, while some of us are aggressive and want to invest in risky asset classes to generate high returns. But here, it is vital to recognize that all asset classes do not move in the same direction at the same time. Therefore, it becomes imperative for us to diversify our investments across various asset classes and invest according to our asset allocation. So first, let's understand what is meant by asset allocation. Asset allocation is an investment strategy. It helps to define a roadmap for our investment portfolio with appropriate diversification across asset classes. It helps to keep a balance between risk and return of any particular asset class. Asset allocation determines what amount of risk is to be taken to earn a particular return. Asset allocation refers to investing a certain percentage of your investable surplus in respective asset classes such as equity, debt, gold, and real estate. You see, all the investments are considered separately and only particular percentage is invested in each asset class on the basis of your risk-taking capability. But the next question that arises is, how is asset allocation determined? So let us take a look at some key parameters that you should use while determining your asset allocation. Asset allocation can be determined on the basis of the following factors: age, income, expenses, assets, liabilities, time horizon, and willingness to take risk. Let's take up each of them in more detail. Age. Your age is one of the biggest factors in determining your asset allocation. When you're young, you can take higher risk and invest into riskier asset classes such as equity. As your age increases, your risk-taking capability decreases and you become risk-averse. The table here shows that an individual who is of the age of 25 years has much higher risk-taking capability than an individual whose age is 55 years. It is because an individual at the age of 25 years has more time to recover the bad phases of riskier assets and therefore can afford to take higher risk. So if you have not yet started defining your asset allocation, then you should start doing it immediately. Income. Your income also determines your asset allocation. High income is equal to high risk tolerance. An individual who has a high income and expects growth rate in the future can tolerate high risk. He can invest in more riskier assets. The table here also depicts that when your income grows at a faster pace, you can afford to take higher risk, but when the income growth rate is less, your risk-taking capability reduces. Expenses. Considering your expenses while determining your asset allocation is also very vital, because your expenses are also an integral part while determining your asset allocation. Low expenses is equal to high risk tolerance. An individual who has low expenses and spends wisely even in the future can tolerate higher risk. He can invest more in riskier asset classes. In the table, you can see that if you have an expected growth rate in your expenses as low as 5% as compared to an individual who has 20% expected growth rate in expenses, then your risk-taking capability is much higher than the other individual. Assets. The existing assets you hold in your investment portfolio is vital while determining your future asset allocation. Consider the concentration level of each asset class in your portfolio. Some individuals are too heavily invested in a particular asset class and forget to diversify the investments well. Some believe that real estate is the best asset class to invest in as it gives them dual benefit of appreciation in the value of the asset as well as rental income. But what they forget is real estate is also an illiquid asset which cannot be sold easily in case of emergencies. You should never put all your eggs in one basket. So proper asset allocation is necessary to diversify your investment portfolio well. Liabilities. Consider your loans and liabilities while determining your asset allocation. You see, your current liabilities can also affect your asset allocation. If you have big liabilities, then you have huge burden to service them, and that decreases your investment surplus and also the risk-taking ability. High interest rates on your loans leads to burden on your cash flows. So in case you owe a lot, then you need to invest in low-risk asset classes such as debt, because any increase in the interest rate on your loans taken can affect your cash flows negatively. The table here shows that the lesser your liabilities, the more risk you can afford to take, and vice versa. Time horizon. Consider your investment time horizon. Asset allocation is also determined on the basis of time horizon in which you wish to accumulate an amount for your future goal. Longer time horizon is equal to high risk-taking ability. Longer your time horizon, higher the amount of risk you can afford to take. In the table you can see that when you have a time horizon of 30 years, you have a much higher risk-taking capability than if you have just 5 years of time horizon. Longer time horizon leads to increased risk-taking capability and higher allocation towards riskier asset classes. Willingness to take risk. Your willingness to take risk determines what amount of return you should expect from your investments. Are you ready to take high risk? That is what you should ask yourself. While investing, asking this question is imperative. If the answer is yes, you can look to have high allocation towards high return generating instruments like equity. If the answer is no, then you should identify and allocate assets for your portfolio prudently. High risk is equal to high return. Do not forget, you may get rewarded for taking high risk, but there may be risk on your capital invested. Low risk is equal to low return. If you are not willing to take risk, you will have to compromise on your returns as well. In the table here, you can clearly see that equities have the highest return expectation, but also carry with them highest risk. Debt, on the other hand, offers lowest return expectation and thus lowest risk. So if you are willing to take high risk involved in equities, then your allocation towards equities will be higher, and you can also expect high return on your investments over the long term. But if you cannot tolerate high risk, then you would be better off allocating higher percentage towards debt. But at the same time, it will also decrease your return expectation. You see, it is vital to define a risk tolerance first and then determine which asset class you should be investing in. How to determine an asset allocation? That's the question. To help you understand better on that, let's take an example of 3 individuals who are at different stages of their life cycle. Vijay is a 30-year-old unmarried individual, while Ajay is a 45-year-old married person with 2 kids, while Sanjay is a 60-year-old retired individual. Since Vijay is young and has just started earning few years back, he has only few assets, but his time horizon is around 20 to 30 years, so his overall risk-taking capability is high. Ajay's income is high, but he also has dependents and liabilities. His time horizon is 10 to 15 years, so his overall risk-taking capability is moderate. Sanjay is retired and only his spouse is dependent on him. Since he does not have any income, he relies on his assets to take care of his day-to-day expenses. His time horizon is short and therefore his overall risk-taking capability is low. So what could be the suitable asset allocation for each of them? Well, in case of Vijay, since his overall risk-taking capability is high and he has long-term time horizon, his allocation towards equity should be highest and lowest towards debt. So he can invest around 80% of his investable surplus in equity, 15% in debt and 5% in gold. This allocation is expected to give him high returns, but at the same time, he will have an aggressive investment portfolio. He need not be too much worried about it though, as the time horizon is long-term and his investment portfolio has a lot more time to recover from the short-term downturn of the equity markets. In case of Ajay, since his overall risk-taking capability is moderate and he has a medium-term time horizon, he can have a mix of equity and debt with slight high allocation towards equity. So he could invest about 65% of his investable surplus in equity, 25% in debt, and 10% in gold. This allocation is expected to give him sufficient returns to achieve his future goals with a balanced investment portfolio. In case of Sanjay, since his overall risk-taking capability is low and he has a short-term time horizon, he needs preservation of capital. So Sanjay should have a higher allocation towards debt, slight allocation towards equity, and lowest towards gold. So he can invest around 20% of his investable surplus in equity, 75% in debt, and 5% in gold. This allocation will give him low returns from a low-risk investment portfolio. This portfolio will be ideal for him as his main objective is preservation of capital rather than growth on investments, since he is not earning and dependent upon his portfolio for his day-to-day expenses. So far, we have learned what asset allocation is and how ideally determining it will benefit you to diversify your investment portfolio. But before we wrap up this session of learning, here are some points you must keep in mind while managing your finances. Number 1, invest early. As we have learned in our earlier learning session, it is the early bird who gets a bigger pie. Also, as your age increases, your risk-taking ability reduces. So start your investments early so that you can take the benefit of a long-term time horizon and possibly even be skewed towards equity for better wealth creation. Remember, if you have higher future growth in income, it increases your risk-taking ability. Keep a track of your expenses. Avoid unnecessary expenses because a penny saved is penny earned. Diversify your assets. You should not be biased towards any particular asset class. Try to diversify your investments to reduce the overall investment risk on your portfolio. Avoid excessive loans. They can disturb your asset allocation pattern. So ensure that you are not taking too much burden of managing excessive loans. Longer your time horizon, greater will be the risk-taking capability. So start early with your investments and adopt prudence to live a blissful and prosperous life. So to end today's learning exercise, we now invite you to test your learning by taking up this simple quiz and win exciting prizes. Thank you for participating. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.